Welcome, everybody, to the Nuggets of Gold podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about Trey Lance and going over some Trey Lance film. But before we get into that, Ricky, I want to just hear what you think about him as a player. What are some of the strengths that you see on his tape? What are some of the weaknesses? And I guess what are some of the concerns that you have moving forward when he, has to jump such a high level of competition from FCS football to NFL football?
So yeah, I know I'm not quite the huge Trey Lance fan that you are, but I think he's a superb athlete, like really true dual threat NFL dual threat quarterback. I don't think there's a whole lot of NFL quarterbacks who can run like him. I think he has a lot to work with his throwing motions, not in terms of like he needs to improve a lot, but I think if he does improve a little bit, he can take away all the naysayers that talk about his arm strength because the velocity is there. He just needs to get a little bit more touch and a little bit more feel, but I think that has to do more with the system that he was in. He was in a very vertical run first system. So like they would run the ball and then they would use it to test people vertical. And he was throwing to wide open guys. In 2019, which most of his film's from, he had a great offensive line. So those are two things that just kind of concern me. You hear all this talk about how he made all these adjustments at the line of scrimmage. He knew how to do the protections, how much of a film junkie he is. And I think that'll really help him. But my only concern is just, in my opinion, he never faced timing or he never faced pressure like he will in the NFL. He didn't face coverage like he will in the NFL. He was never really tested to throw into tight windows like we saw Justin Fields do, like we saw some of the other guys do. But I think he still can be a great NFL quarterback. I just think it's going to take a few more years than it would compared to the other guys.
Yeah, so we were kind of talking about this, and one of the things that we both felt that was maybe like the most difficult aspect of evaluating Lance was the fact that he's not playing against high competition, and his team was so much better than the other team around them, and
Mm-hmm.
and actually most of the team was like still there, and they're not as good. Like they needed him to be that quarterback. I don't know if you knew about that, but they did lose a couple important players at some key positions. I know that their tackle left. But for the most part, most of that team came back and then played, and they're playing right now in spring ball, and they are not as good as they were with Trey Lance. So I guess that's like something that you can kind of like use to gauge how much he's helping the team. But it's definitely really hard to evaluate him just because one, the level of play isn't very high, and then two, his team, like you're talking about, like a lot of the plays you go and see it, and the guys are just running wide open and he's not asked to do a lot. He actually does have a lot of clean pockets, and that was one of the things I really liked about him was you can definitely tell that he feels and understands the pocket around him, and he gets that. Like he'll know that someone's coming around the edge, and he'll step over and he'll do slides and he'll roll out, and he does it at good times. But for the most part, his offensive line is consistently winning, so it's a little bit tougher to evaluate than when Fields is going against guys, and we see him playing against a Clemson defense, and they bring a safety in, or they bring a linebacker blitz, and it's a lot more advanced, I guess. But it's still hard to like I don't want to discount like his ability to read protections and to have all that responsibility. And we'll get into this in a little later at the end of this show. But when we talk about like with Kyle's system, he also ran a very similar system to that. And one of the things I've heard on as like a knock on him is, oh, like he's not gonna be able to translate to like Kyle's offense. I don't get that. Like they almost ran the same offense, so I will say that. Like that's part of the thing that confuses me. I understand questioning the level of competition he played because that's got to be like the biggest factor for a lot of people. Now we did see Carson Wentz come out and he really excelled pre-injury, but don't know. I don't really think that they look that similar. Like that's the only way I really would compare them. Like yeah, they're both really big dudes that are athletic, but they don't really have a similar playing style, so it's hard to kind of compare them on that. But I'll go over my scouting report real quick and just see what you think about that, and then we'll hop into the film. So my summary of Trey Lance. The first two things that stood out to me on film were Trey Lance's ability to extend plays inside and outside the pocket and quickly go through his progressions. Lance is able to do both very well. While I don't think he has a ton of weaknesses on tape, there are a few that are quite concerning. Accuracy is incredibly important, and Lance does miss many throws. Sometimes it's because he throws his fastball when he doesn't need to, and other times when he does it when he throws the ball when his feet aren't set. That was one of the big problems with his motion is it's just not consistent. Um, while the arm with the arm while he has the arm strength, he will need to improve his touch if he's going to be able to consistently complete deep passes in the NFL. We were talking about that too, and I know you got into the touch a little bit, and we'll definitely see that on his tape. From a physical standpoint, Lance is perfectly built to be a quarterback. His abilities are on full display when he's out there. He shows them through his movement in the pocket and downhill running style. He dominated so far in his career, and he has the talent to continue to do so for a long time. And before you get into it, the biggest question with me is going to be how much better can he get? Like how much can he improve? And the big thing is he needs to land in a spot where a coach is going to be able to help him do that, because I think he has all the talent, but he's definitely not there yet. So what were you just kind of like comments on how I evaluated him?
I think your evaluation is pretty spot on. I think there's questions from some people about his arm strength, but I don't think they should exist. So I think you said it perfectly when he said he had enough arm strength and it was one of his strengths. I think it will continue to be a strength once he fixes mechanics, because his mechanics are a little off and you already see it. I also think that, like, with your comment on his level of competition is very spot on. And I think the comparison to Carson Wentz, not necessarily as a player, but with just the level of competition, is very fair. I also like to bring up Josh Allen, who had very similar knocks on his competition, and we did see it take a couple of years, but now look where he is. And I'm not saying Trey Lance is on that same trajectory, but I'm just saying, like, if those are our concerns in the past, it's proven to not be a huge concern in the long run. In regards, like you said, with the Pac or Power Five conferences, you're going to see a lot tighter windows there. You're going to see a lot more pressure. And I think he could have dealt with it based off of how he dealt with calling the entire offense, or not entire offense, but a lot of the offense just on audibles and checks and stuff like that, and was able to do that from his film work. So I think his hard work and dedication can translate into those little things that he'll need for the NFL. I just don't think he's been asked to work on those things yet. So I don't think he has. And I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. Also, real quick on the Josh Allen, kind of like bringing up him into the discussion, I'll say they don't win the same way, but their biggest question mark was the same thing in college, which is accuracy, and specifically
Yep.
downfield accuracy and touch. So I will say, like, that's a prime example of a guy overcoming that. One thing I have to say about Josh Allen, he's with Sean McDermott, who early on looks like he could be a Hall of Fame caliber coach. Like, that's how good their program has looked. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing. Like, if you're talking about bringing a guy in and getting his high end, I think Lance is awesome for that job. But if you don't have the coaching staff in place and you draft Lance, I don't think it's going to work out. And he's my quarterback. I say 2A, and Lance is my 2B. I mean, sorry, and Fields is my 2B. So I mean, I love both those guys, but I just like him a little bit more if he's in that high end system. But let's get into the film, because there's a lot of stuff to go over. You know, we'll see some accuracy concerns and whatnot, but let's get into it. Alrighty, so for the film session today, we're going to be going over Trey Lance's game against Montana State, and we're using this YouTube account, and I'll make sure to link it in the bio to check out their film. But we're going to see him playing in the FCS semifinals, so let's get ready. So they're going to get Lance started out here with a pretty easy play. He gets the ball out quick, just throws the running back. Simple play, not really much here. Running back goes, gets a couple yards, but not much to start the game, just to kind of get him eased into the situation. And then you're going to see his running ability and physicality right here as he takes the ball and gets about 5 yards on the second play of the game. So over the first few plays here, they don't really ask Lance to do much, but then on this play, they run a play action. Good ball on the out. What do you like about this play, Ricky?
I just love the concept and his ability to perform. This is a type of throw that he might be asked to make in the NFL, and he executes it perfectly. Granted, he does have time, but he just sets his feet and slings it to the far side of the field.
So then after that outplay, they're going to see him used in a zone read, and he goes and picks up the first down. Another great run, and one of the things that you definitely see a lot of is the physicality. So, Ricky, I just want to ask you, what are your thoughts on just the way he runs? On one hand, he's not going against super high competition, of course, but you just see him drive his legs and really, really just play physical football. So what are your just thoughts on him doing that kind of stuff?
I think you really see him use that full 6'3", 220 frame. He's really strong, and it's clear the way he runs. He runs pretty effectively. He's decent pad level for a great pad level for a quarterback, decent pad level for a runner. The only thing I would worry about that is just keeping him healthy during the season. We've seen running quarterbacks not last durability wise, who have been a lot bigger and a lot stronger than him. So I'm not saying it's not possible, but look at the toll Cam Newton's career took on him just being a runner, like a physical style runner.
Well, and that's also something that I'd probably expect him to slide more in the NFL and not really endure as much contact. But still, and we were talking about this with Justin Fields, but just that natural physicality is such a big deal for these quarterbacks, I think, where you can see that he's not afraid to take a hit. And it'll definitely look different when he's going up against NFL defensive linemen opposed to FCS guys. But I mean, still, like, you just see that natural toughness there. And that's what we saw with Justin Fields as well, where it's kind of the same thing where you just want to see them slide more, not take as much contact, but you're happy that they're willing to do it. And there's a good ball placement right there.
Yeah, but the thing with Justin Fields is you saw him slide a few times, at least in his career. I don't think we saw Trey Lance slide once in his film. And he doesn't seem like the player who's going to slide. He seems like he wants to put his shoulder down. He thinks he can run through anyone.
That was a pretty good ball right there.
Yeah, that's a pretty good ball. I mean, like we said for Justin Fields, like you're not going to hit on every deep ball and just giving him that much of a chance. And
he slows up too.
Chance.
Oh, that was a beautiful ball. What is that, like 60 yards in the air, 50 yards in the air? I mean, that's and that was one of the things that we talked about before, I think, with Trey Lance was just that throwing motion. Let's see how it looks on this one because it's not really consistent. But you see him drive the ball pretty well. It looked good. He looked a little bit like a little out of control if you watch his leg kind of. Looks like he's kind of leaning.
If you see him throw, he doesn't really engage his legs consistently or his hips consistently. And he still drove that ball super far. So it's very promising to see that arm strength. And I know you and I talked about this before. We saw him in the lab with Jordan Palmer working on mechanics. So that's always very promising to see.
So then we're going to see Lance on a 3rd and 7 here and another deep ball. And that one is just out of control. So let's check back on his feet on this one. And we're going to see it's just there. He's holding them back. Look at his hips. They're stuck back. He's on his back foot. Now, he brings it forward, but there's a lot of hesitation. I think that's what leads to the misfire on this play. Do you agree with me on that, Ricky?
Yeah, I think he doesn't really engage them. And I think it's just, again, like we talked about with a lot of these quarterbacks, but Trey Lance especially is an inconsistency in throwing motion. And if you look at some of his games, I forgot which one you and I talked about, but there was one game where he only threw the ball 10 times. So when you have a guy like that in a scheme like this, you got to cut him a little bit of slack.
And then you're going to see him here, pump fake. And then, I mean, even look at the feet here. Like, he gets the ball there, but his feet aren't even pointing really at the direction. They're pointing to the guy in the flats. And he's still able to make the throw, which is definitely impressive, but the consistency is not there on the film. And you also got to keep in mind, he's only 18 years old in this film, so he's probably looks a lot different now. And we've seen some videos with Jordan Palmer, and his motion looks a lot different. But one of the things when we were kind of talking about him, and one of the issues I think that you definitely had when you evaluated him is that you're evaluating him a lot on projections. And when there's a lack of consistency and whatnot, it's more about him just being an athlete over him being a quarterback. And you want to see him kind of make that development to truly look like a quarterback. And so I just got to ask, like, throughout this film, you're seeing him look more like an athlete, correct?
Yes. I mean, and I'm not saying he doesn't have the ability to develop into a quarterback, because you also got to keep in mind the system that he's in. Like, look how much time he consistently has. He has athletes all around the field who are consistently beating their guys. So he's just not asked to do a ton of stuff that we see a lot of the other quarterbacks that we typically, or that teams typically draft this high. We're just not seeing him do a ton of that. But I don't think that should discount him as a player necessarily, because we also heard him doing line calls, at the line adjustments, like audibles, stuff like that. And it kind of takes a lot to earn that trust from the coach to be able to do all those adjustments at the line of scrimmage and be able to do all these things that he was able to do. So yes, he wasn't asked to do a lot of the quarterback things that I like to see out of top 5 guys, but he was asked to do other quarterback things that other top 5 guys weren't asked to do. So it's kind of tough, but he definitely has the athleticism to be drafted in the top 5 and the projections, I guess you could say.
But that also just kind of talks about, like, he needs to land somewhere good because he needs to become a quarterback. And we've definitely emphasized that in the non-film portion of this recording. But I mean, you can tell on film, like a lot of these plays, like this right here, he picks up 5 extra yards just because of his offensive line, and also because he keeps his legs churning. But like a lot of the film is hard to really like look at and evaluate and say, okay, what is this guy doing? One thing, there was a couple plays that I rewound a while back where it looks just like Kyle Shanahan's playbook, where it's play action, boots off the side, hits a tight end, hits a fullback. And there's a lot of stuff that he's running that's similar to that. So for the 49ers fit, I do think that's somewhere where maybe he's not being asked to play, against a high competition and stuff, but it is good that he gets to play a similar styled offense to what Kyle runs. And that's of course, if he's drafted by San Francisco at 3. But what do you think about that? How does that affect him, like playing in that similar system? Do you think there's a lot, like that means a lot, or do you think that's not really that big of a deal?
I think it would be huge for a quarterback like him. I think going in and doing or using or operating under a completely new system might take some more time to develop. But if he uses some stuff that he's more familiar with, some drop backs, some styles of play, some reads, some progressions, just keep him somewhat familiar to what he's doing and then grow from there, I think it'll really help him develop as a quarterback.
I will say this is one of those plays where I really like him. I talk a lot about his pocket presence, and he does have a lot of very good protection, but to kind of run across line of scrimmage like that, I mean, that looks like very high level. That's a play extender type play right there. And that's what you see from Mahomes, Wilson, Rodgers, this type of, all right, let me pull it back. Okay, no one here. Let me redirect, and then let's find this guy downfield and throw it on a run. Also, look at this natural motion right here on the throw, because this is what we were talking about Justin Fields. When it's just easy and it's just, all right, go be an athlete, he's able to make those throws. And there he's squared up, he's looking down the field and delivers a great ball. What do you like about that play right there?
Well, I love his creativity in the pocket and his pocket presence, like you said, to just know where he has space and just create more time for his receivers to be creative and get to open field. His throwing mechanics on this one, his throwing motion looks great, but his feet and hips don't look so great to me. But when you're an athlete like he is, you can just get away with it. I think he put the ball in the perfect spot. Like, he doesn't drift it too far, so the guy carries out of bounds. He allows him some space to get some yards after the catch and finish this play for a touchdown.
So we're kind of getting to the end of the film here, but it's definitely tough to project him from a film standpoint moving forward. And I think that's probably going to be the biggest question, just because a lot of the competition questions and just questions about how he can really turn into a true quarterback are definitely there. And I think those are prevalent. I mean, I've said this time and time again, he's been my quarterback too since the summer. I think he is immensely talented. That's the reason why he's up there for me. But I mean, Ricky, you definitely feel like there's some serious questions about how he's going to project to the NFL, correct? Just because of the low competition?
So 2 major factors contribute to that. One is the low competition. And 2 is I'm a big stats guy, and I did some research into his stats. And out of like the top 5 quarterbacks, he's the most inaccurate by every like statistical source that you can find. They all do true accuracy adjustment ratings and percentages, and he is by far the worst. You don't see it in all the film, but you do see it in moments here and there. And I think he can improve on that. But to me, the other guys that are in the top 4 are just clearly more developed than he is right now. And that's not to say that Trey Lance won't have a better career than any of them. It just, to me, he's more of a project player. And if you're going to draft the guy in the top 5 at the quarterback position or in the top 10, I'd like to see him start sooner than later. And I don't really think that's the recipe for success for Trey Lance.
Yeah, and I don't really think that's an option for him either. Like, maybe we could see him start early on, but he has the chance to start the earliest in Kyle's system, and I still would not be surprised whatsoever if he was not starting for a full season. And I've seen a lot of people say that he is a big-time project. I definitely think he's a project quarterback, but a lot of the questions are probably answered that we just can't really see in this film, especially. Like, let's just like looking at it from a, hey, he's been trading with Jordan Palmer, all those accuracy concerns. Like, we don't know what's going to shape out with that kind of stuff. So like you said, A lot of it's projection based, but I think that's going to do it for this film stuff. Not a lot of film today, but we're going to keep talking about him and talk about his fit in Kyle Shanahan's system coming up. So moving on from the film, just to kind of wrap it up, I'll let you start, Ricky, but what do you think about Lance in Kyle's system, and how do you feel about him potentially being the pick at 3? I know we just talked about Fields, and I know that you think that's the better selection, but what do you think about if they did take Trey Lance at number 3?
I don't think it's a bad pick at all. I also don't understand where these questions are coming from about him fitting into Kyle's system. From what I've seen and what the film, or from the film I've seen at least, I think they run very similar style systems. I see a lot of I formation and I mean, I guess they're a little bit more to the outside, and the Niners are a little bit more inside run, but a very run heavy offense. I think Trey Lance would add a lot of versatility to their run offense, just with veer options and read options and those kinds of things. I do think he would also add a little bit more verticality to the receivers. Like, you got Ayuk and Debo who can run downfield, and he can still check it down to Kittle over the middle or something like that. But I think he would fit in perfectly. I do think it would take a little time, and you would see a little bit more of Jimmy G. And depending on where you stand as a Niners fan, you may want that, or you may want a little less of that. So I think that is something important to keep in mind, but I think he's a solid fit.
Yeah, no, I definitely love his fit in the offense. And you brought up how the offenses of North Dakota State and the 49ers offense, how they look similar. They actually ran some of the same plays, which is really funny to me. Like, legit same terminology from the Niners playbook. And not every play, of course, but like there was a couple where they are the exact same concept and everything. So pretty funny how it's so similar. It almost is like he's tailor-made to kind of make the system. And when I watch him, like I think he could absolutely flourish under Kyle's system. I think the downfield accuracy is by far the biggest concern for me. And of course the speed. That's a no-brainer. But like the speed of the NFL. Every quarterback, though, I'll say this: every quarterback is going to have to adjust to playing different speeds. We haven't talked about Mac Jones yet, and I don't know if me and Ricky will, but if we do, we're gonna kind of talk about, hey, everyone's gonna talk about speed of the game, and he might be playing SEC football, but he's playing SEC football from a clean pocket more than any other dude. And that's also the problem with a guy like Lance, is because he's doing that as well, where everyone's just winning so much. Receivers are winning, offensive line is winning, and you have so much of your guys just dominating the other competition where it's hard to evaluate that. And especially when these guys aren't as good as NFL players. So that will always be my biggest concern with Trey Lance. Still love the dude. I would still be so hyped if the 49ers drafted him. Like that's what I would like to see, him or Fields. Don't mind either way. But I think at the end of the day, the reason why we're not going to see him drafted in Kyle's system is because he's not going to be able to start from day one. And the 49ers roster, and I know this isn't really about Trey Lance individually, but the 49ers rosters, they're trying to win soon. Maybe not right now, but they're trying to win soon. And Justin Fields definitely does the most to do that. But I had to put that out there real quick. But with him in the offense, you let him sit behind a guy for a year. I don't think it would take 2 years. I think a year is pretty much max for all these guys. Also, if you didn't know about Trey Lance, he graduated college in 3 years and high school in 3 years, or 3 1/4, something like that. He's only 20 years old currently. He is much younger than these other guys. He's only has 1 year of film, and that film is when he is 18 years old. We talked about a while back, like we talked a lot about how he's not very accurate and his motion isn't consistent. He's been working with Jordan Palmer this offseason. And so if that's like the big question we have is if he's going to get accurate, I would put my money on it that he does, especially because we've seen a guy come from the same program, get taught how to go get that, like develop that accuracy, who also works. Josh Allen works with Jordan Palmer, does he not?
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. So if that's like your big question with him is the accuracy, I do not think we'll see that problem if he's in a good situation in the NFL, which the 49ers, I think, are an excellent situation for any quarterback. But if the speed is the issue, I think that's the hardest part to evaluate from his game. So if that's the big question, I think that's everyone's big question. At least that should be. If the accuracy is still your biggest concern, I really think he's going to be able to overcome that if he gets put into the right spot. But that's the big if. Will he be put into the right spot? Because if we see him selected by, I don't know, who's a team that could select him that would just be a disaster? The Lions.
The Lions, yeah.
The Lions would be an absolute disaster. Like I would be like, I'm sorry, like this is the guy I really am rooting for, but I don't think he's going to succeed. If he gets to get mentored by a Matt Ryan, I think that could help a lot.
I do too. I was thinking the Falcons just with their coaching staff, but I think Matt Ryan as a quarterback and as a leader could really help develop him. And I know they're not very similar play styles, but Matt Ryan is a very accurate passer. He always has been. So I think they could work on that. And especially if he stayed with Jordan Palmer, we already seen what he's done with Josh Allen. Another guy he kind of reminds me of a little bit, not completely, but just Sam Darnold with the lack of experience that people bring up. People brought that up with Darnold when he came out of SC. And yeah, he went to a bad situation, and that's kind of what's happened. But I think Darnold's going to turn things around in Carolina.
Also, another good team, and pretty much about ready to wrap it up. But the football team, Washington football team, love them.
Yes.
And they've been apparently like heavily rumored. The team. So I'll just say this: this is my biggest take of the draft by far. My biggest take, or my hottest take, is that if Trey Lance and Justin Fields were to end up in San Francisco and Carolina, which it's not going to happen now because one of them will not end up in Carolina, or it's very unlikely, those two guys would be better than Lawrence and Wilson because of the situations they're in. I think that's how important this draft is in terms of Lance and Fields, because their talent is so high end. Like, if they get into a good spot, I think they're going to be elite quarterbacks. I think we're going to talk about them among the Josh Allens, apparently the way people talk about Justin Herbert, which he's a good player, but I don't think he's quite on that level yet, but like the Watsons, the Wilsons, like those kind of super, super elite quarterbacks. I think these guys have the potential to be that. And if you put them into a Carolina system, into a San Francisco system, there's a couple other systems out there that could be really good, but you get them into a spot where they're going to be able to ball out. I think these guys, both their talent is just immense. So I'm all for them going into good spots. I think the league would love that. And I really hope Trey Lance, if he doesn't end up to the Niners at number 3, ends up in a very good location, hopefully in the AFC, because I don't want to get beat by him twice a year.
I mean, you said the Washington football team, and that my hot take was I think that Trey Lance is actually a better fit for the Washington football team than Justin Fields. I think that's the only program that Trey Lance is a better fit for, specifically.
Do you think that's the best spot for him to land in, or at least
absolutely,
one of them?
Absolutely. I think it is the number one spot for him. I think Ron Rivera will develop him in what he needs to be and maximize his skill set.
Which I think is really high quality. He's a high quality player. He's a damn good quarterback. If he has a chance to be a damn good quarterback, I should say.
Exactly. So I think I 100% agree with everything you said.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode. Really fun to go over the film of these guys and just kind of talk about how we evaluate them. But thanks everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you guys soon.